So last night on Raw concluded this year's 2024 WWE Draft. And some people have said that it was a slight improvement over SmackDown. And from what I read online and saw via the YouTube clips on WWE's YouTube page, I would have to say, it was kind of a slight improvement. And I think the reason for that is because they were allotted a lot more time. The additional hour, with Raw and everything. And because of the fact that on USA, they had a little bit more leeway, if you will, when it comes to, certain things being said and so on and so forth. Now, the one thing people do praise the draft for this year is the rules. The rules basically being, done in a way to where, you're not flip-flopping champions, from one brand to another. That champions are protected this time around. So, it doesn't matter, who gets, how the draft goes. The champions are going to always be with the brand, even if they lose the titles. So they're not going anywhere. They also stated that, certain injured superstars would not be eligible, which kind of was conflicting because you had Seth Rollins and CM Punk getting drafted. And some people are like, well, Seth is going to be gone for a bit. Why was he drafted? And my only thought is maybe the injury isn't as bad as being reported and that he'll be back a lot sooner than some people are expecting. And also because his wife, Becky Lynch, who is the current Women's World Champion, is on Raw. One of the things that WWE under Triple H's, watch has made sure to improve on is to keep basically the husband and wife duos in real life together, which is why also you had, Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell, when they got drafted as a unit, as a team, later on you had Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa get drafted as well, but all four of them over to SmackDown, thus you could keep Johnny and Candice together. So, so that's one reason why Seth got drafted. You don't want to open the door to where, to where he could basically, can end up on SmackDown, on a different schedule than, Becky. So drafting him to Raw now makes more sense. And again, it sounds like maybe to me, what WWE is doing here is letting us know that, hey, the injury he's, had surgery for, it's not as bad as we think it is, or it's being reported, and he'll be back sooner than we think. Now, as far as Rhea Ripley, she wasn't eligible, and, my thought process is this. Rhea's part of Judgment Day, so I think by default, with the Judgment Day being drafted to stay on Raw, that basically she's going to be, by association, end up, back on Raw as well. So I think that's why, she wasn't drafted, because wherever Judgment Day was going to go, she was going to be there with them, period. So there you go. Anyway, though, a lot of things people have said about the draft, although, outside of that, some of the positives and some of the confusion, the one thing that people have been saying is the draft needs to have an overhaul. It needs to be different. It needs to, have a style to it that's not, repetitive. It's not boring. It doesn't drag. It needs a bit of spice, added to it. It needs a bit of a, a bit of a shakeup, if you will, on how it's presented. And I do agree it does. I do agree that it does need a bit of a shakeup. It does need, some kind of a change that will get people invested, in the draft, every year it happens. And one example a lot of people have been saying that they should go back to is what they did in the mid-2000s. And what they did in the mid-2000s, mostly around 2005, is they would have whoever the draft pick was just show up on that brand. Like I can remember getting a ticket to the SmackDown when SmackDown was taped on Tuesday nights and then, aired on Thursday nights. I remember going to that Tuesday night SmackDown taping in Kansas City thinking, okay, I'm going to see John Cena, I'm going to see this person, I'm going to see that person, I'm going to be there, watching the whole ECW invasion situation building up to the One Night Stand pay-per-view happen, and so on. Well, what happened though the night before when I was watching Raw, because Raw was from St. Louis, is that was the beginning of the 2005 draft, and the first person that got drafted was John Cena, the guy that I was hoping, a lot of other people were hoping to see at the SmackDown taping, the following night. He ended up getting drafted to Raw. But in exchange, the person I saw get drafted over to SmackDown from Raw was Chris Benoit, which before everything that went down 2 years later, I thought was a heck of a pickup. And I thought, hey, John Cena, this might be just as good, if not better. Anyway, a lot of people have pointed towards, that incarnation of the draft and how it was done. And they kind of feel that maybe what, WWE should do is go back to that. To where, every hour, let's say for Raw, every, top of the hour, you could have, the next line of draft picks, for Raw, just come on out, just debut. Like this year, you had the LWO going over from SmackDown to Raw, right? And the Final Testament. So, the way people envision it is they could have had the LWO come out, as a group showing, hey, we're the newest members of Raw. And then later on, you could have the Final Testament do the same thing. So a lot of people look at, that variation of the draft as something that, WWE could go back to as an improvement. Because basically it was like, you never knew exactly who was going to be showing up on Raw or SmackDown as the newest draft pick. You never knew. And I agree that maybe that's one way they can go back to. Some have suggested going back to the tumbler, the randomizing lottery, the lottery draft, if you will. Some have even suggested doing the computerized lottery draft, where after a match is won by, a brand superstar and everything, that brand gets a draft pick, So I do agree there are ways of doing it. Doing the lottery tumbler idea is something they can go with. The brand versus brand match, where the winning brand gets a draft pick. That's one way they could do it. So you get more wrestling, on the show, and it has a purpose. And I do agree going back to what they did in the mid 2000s, 2005 mostly. I think is another way to do it. So there are three different options. There are three different options that they can go back to next year if they continue the draft, and really help improve the draft, in a visual and more, I guess you could say, acceptable, way that people won't be complaining about, and fans, and people might actually be more, in favor of, in my opinion. But that's just my thoughts. But I do agree it does need an overhaul. And those are the three examples that I've been hearing people talk about and spout about all across the internet since, last night, and if not since this past Friday. But let me know what your thoughts are. How do you think the draft should be improved? What direction would you go in for an improvement? And what did you think of this year's draft overall? And until then, I'm out.